Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin versus Ethereum. This is the number one most requested analysis that people want from me, which is, hey Dan, tell me what you think about Bitcoin and Ethereum and how they're different and why do you primarily just like Bitcoin? So that's what we're going to dig into today. I'm going to switch over to my other screen. So to get this first, this comes out on my newsletter. So this is the Held report. So if you search Dan Held Substack, you can go find this. I'm also including a link here. And every Thursday, I publish this information first here, and then you can see it on YouTube a couple days later. So this comes out Sunday. All right, so to dig in, the origin story of Bitcoin and Ethereum are extremely different. And the origin story and the initial launch in terms of like how many coins are distributed are very, very important. With Bitcoin, Bitcoin was planted in the middle of the 2008 financial crisis at the peak moment of despair. I write this links to my Planting Bitcoin Season article, which goes in more in depth as to the exact moments that Bitcoin was planted. But these words by Satoshi, I think, really hit this home. Satoshi states, the root problem with conventional currency is all the trust that's required to make it work. The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. Banks must be trusted to hold our money and transfer it electronically, but they lend it out in waves of credit bubbles with barely a fraction in reserve. And he goes on. So Satoshi set out to solve the problem of trust with the financial system and money. And to ensure that this launch was considered fair, Satoshi took very careful steps to have it be perceived that everything was launched fairly. For example, there was no pre-mine. Satoshi didn't give himself any coins. Everyone had to work for the coins they got. He gave 2 months heads up before he launched the network, so he gave everyone plenty of time to get used to the idea. Bitcoin also had no value for 1.5 years, which meant that they circulated much more freely because people were just kind of moving them back and forth for fun. And then, unlike every other founder in history, Satoshi didn't cash out. So Satoshi did mine some coins just like anyone else could right when Bitcoin launched. Those coins are worth approximately $52 billion, and he has never moved them or used them once in 12 years. So let's compare this super fair launch that was set out to solve trust with money. Let's compare this to Ethereum. So with Ethereum, and I pulled this from Vitalik's personal blog, his About Me page. So Vitalik says, I happily played World of Warcraft during 2007 through 2010, but one day Blizzard removed the damage component from my beloved Warlock Siphon Life spell. I cried myself to sleep, and on that day I realized what horrors centralized services can bring. So that was the launch of Ethereum, was Vitalik, being really frustrated with a gaming company taking away one of his swords. And so he felt that there should be a new decentralized app store to solve this problem. In Ethereum at the time, to solve this problem of the decentralized app store, this had perfect narrative market fit with Silicon Valley. And this links to my article, Why Silicon Valley Doesn't Get Bitcoin, which is an in-depth deep dive of Silicon Valley mindset. But when Ethereum was launched, app stores and apps were all the rage. Uber, Airbnb were all mobile first. There's an app for that, was the terminology. This is 6 years ago. And so Ethereum had marketed itself as a decentralized app store, which allowed for dApps to be spun up without restriction. And this was the holy grail that Silicon Valley VCs and builders had dreamed about. But what was interesting with Ethereum's launch is they did something very controversial, which was the pre-mine. And in terms of 63% of all Ethereum ever produced as of today were sold before the network launched. And so some of these 12 million were given to the developers, including Vitalik himself, and 60 million to the ICO participants. Now, people forget that at the time, this was extremely unsavory and controversial. The only fair launches were considered to be ones that had no pre-mine. After Ethereum, the pre-mine stigma had been lifted. That's why we see pre-mines, ICOs were incredibly popular during 2017, and pre-mines are very commonplace today. So that, I think, gives a good succinct answer to the pre and post sort of, how Ethereum and Bitcoin both were launched and how fair they tried to make it. So in tech, there's a terminology called product market fit. So how well your how well your product solves a problem in the market. And in crypto, we might call this protocol market fit. So how well a protocol solves a problem in the market. And the way that we think through these protocols is that they attach narratives or stories to the protocol to determine, to attract participants, to attract mind share. And with Bitcoin is not immune to this. This happens with Bitcoin. And what we see is the ebb and flow of different narratives. For example, like the orange color here is the cheap payments network. Bitcoin is like a cheap PayPal. This is 2 years old, by the way. But, in 2020, we would have that narrative largely be completely dead. But this censorship-resistant e-gold has been a persistent narrative since day one. And this is important because this narrative is attached to protocol market fit. So what problem is it solving? And this narrative is it's the answer to what problem we're solving. It's Bitcoin is digital gold, store of value. Bitcoin's narrative matches its real world utility. The Ethereum community is really different because they've endorsed very, very radical changes and pivots to their narrative. Even so far as to recently claim the store of value narrative, which is completely different from what they pitched when they launched. The pitch when they launched was that Ethereum was like an oil versus a gold, as it's like the oil is the utility that you need to spend, or kind of like the coin or token that you use to unlock value in a smart contract. And or like it's the token for a usage of a dApp and a dApp platform. And we've seen so many different narratives come and go with Ethereum as the Ethereum has pivoted trying to find product market fit or protocol market fit. And here's a chart that was put together. So this chart was created right after this one was. So it's about 2 years old. And we can see the rise and fall of different narratives. For example, Bitcoin 2.0 is a popular way to name Ethereum. And then dApps, we see the ebb and flow there. We also see ICOs here, and kind of fall out of relevance after 2017 and early 2018. What's funny about this is DeFi and NFTs aren't even a narrative. So this was compiled by an Ethereum enthusiast. And what we find here is that, essentially that NFTs and DeFi are extremely new narratives. Will those still be the same narrative in a year or two? Who knows? Probably not. I mean, based on what we've seen historically, these narratives come and go very quickly. And so these narratives are what are used to seduce Bitcoiners and other believers into buying into Ethereum. Dogecoin, all the other protocols do this same sort of thing. And I just want to highlight this because Bitcoin has had a persistence of the narrative since day one, Gold 2.0. Sure, other narratives have ebbed and flowed, but Ethereum is still trying to find that narrative. It is still trying to figure out what is this protocol useful for. Now, we hypothesize it could be useful for DeFi and NFTs, but again, this chart shows that these narratives fade very quickly and come in and out over time. The only thing that will survive is one that has actual, tangible, real-world value, and that's Bitcoin's Gold 2.0, and Ethereum is still trying to find that. In tech, there's something called total addressable market, which is like what's the total value of the market that you're going after. For Uber, that would be both ride-sharing or taxis, but also maybe like car ownership. So Bitcoin is going after the largest TAM possible, which is all stores of value. And we're talking, this isn't just gold, which is $10 trillion. This is real estate, bonds, equities, broad money, fine art and collectibles. Bitcoin is trying to tackle multi-$100 trillion market cap here. This is huge. And Ethereum is going after a much smaller market cap around applications that need full decentralization. For example, they're seeing some that are driving value today, which are like DEXs. And DEXs are generating fee revenue, and they hypothesize that this is showing product market fit. Same with NFTs. But these are extremely much smaller TAMs or much smaller markets than what Bitcoin is going after. Bitcoin is literally going after the biggest TAM in the world. And so when people whine about, Bitcoin is boring, it only does store of value, I mean, this is really fucking silly. It's like, oh no, it's only tackling the biggest problem in the world. Bitcoin is fine with just being a store of value. That's totally okay. I mean, it's sort of akin to like people complaining that Apple is only a tech company and it should also get into oil production. I mean, it's just silly. So those narratives matter. TAM, what they're going after is, I would say, largely very different, which means I think that Bitcoin has a much, much higher upside in terms of total market capitalization than what Ethereum is going after. And then there's the culture of decentralization. So Bitcoin has chosen to be decentralized across a wide variety of different metrics, whereas the Ethereum community has chosen to embrace features of centralization. For example, like having Vitalik as the leader of Ethereum and increasing the difficulty of running a full node. Decentralization is incredibly important for both Ethereum and Bitcoin because they need to have protocol market fit around Goal 2.0 and dApps. And to do those, you need to have decentralization. Otherwise, governments can shut it down. So there's a couple material issues here that I want to highlight. One is that Bitcoin's monetary policy is its huge breakthrough. But due to the being able to verify that the 21 million hard cap exists is incredibly important. Due to how Ethereum's blockchain is constructed, it's actually very hard to audit the circulating supply. And Pierre Rochard, an accountant, actually highlighted this. So you can click this link and check out a little bit more. Essentially, Pierre asked the Ethereum community, hey, can you audit the monetary policy? I'd like to know how many Ethereum are out there. And they still haven't narrowed it down to a definitive number. Whereas with Bitcoin, anyone can run a small script and validate that X amount of Bitcoin exists as of today. Another big issue are node centralization. So node centralization is a big deal because as these nodes become more and more expensive to run, that means people become more reliant on dedicated infrastructure, like, for example, that runs on centralized services like Amazon AWS or Infura. And this is a really big issue because Infura went down. So Infura, this happened back only a few months ago. Ethereum infrastructure provider Infura is down. There's kind of the joke that it's instead of Ethereum, it's Infurium because Infura is so relied upon, and this highlighted exactly how big this problem is. So when Infura went down, it led to a couple exchanges not being able to have deposits and withdrawals for Ethereum, and all these other service providers relied upon it. And this includes Binance, the largest exchange in the world. So, this is an incredibly huge issue. And it's funny because Vitalik in August 2020 downplays the issue. And so he goes, I think that the Ethereum network is not reliant on Infura. And then a few months later, Infura, it's very much shown that the network does rely on it. And then finally, a part of decentralization here that I think needs to be highlighted is the founder, who is looked up to in both protocols. And with Satoshi, he decided to be pseudonymous. This is really, really smart to do because there's no political weak point to the protocol. Satoshi doesn't exist. He's gone. He's passed it on to a group of other individuals. And, with Vitalik here, this developer worship or, having all of this placed on Vitalik is an incredibly big issue because, Vitalik is influencing monetary policy, game theory, etc. And it leaves Ethereum open to an attack vector as Vitalik is a human. He has human flaws and is potentially corruptible. No one's perfect, including myself and anyone else, right? And Federico Tinga had a really great quote here where he says, Satoshi left because he didn't want his influence to affect the protocol's development, creating a single point of failure. The very idea of Satoshi's vision is itself against Satoshi's vision for Bitcoin. And I think that's really well put. All right, so we've covered a couple different points here around like the origin story and how they were created and how fair Bitcoin was. We have how narratives ebb and flow in this space and how Bitcoin has protocol market fit. We've also touched on how decentralization is such an important element and that the Bitcoin community really embraces that. And then finally, I want to get to stability and what the protocol, the protocol needs to do. The base layer of the financial system needs to be stable. And with Bitcoin, we're going to first touch on protocol stability, and then we're going to get to financial system stability. So Bitcoin's development is intentionally careful and slow. If the world's financial system is to be replaced, it needs a stable foundation in which to be built upon. And Joe Weisenthal from Bloomberg had a really great quote where he goes, something to note that it's impossible for Bitcoin to be the MySpace of cryptocurrency, because for a currency, longevity and unchangedness are features, not bugs. And so what Joe's referring to is the Lindy effect, essentially that the longer Bitcoin remains in existence, the longer society will have confidence that will continue to remain in existence. If Bitcoin exists for 20 years, there'll be a new near universal confidence it might be around for forever. Think about what percentage of humans have lived where Bitcoin has been around their entire lifetime. Kind of like how people all believe that the internet is a permanent feature of the world. With Ethereum, though, we've got some So Bitcoin's protocol is all about stability. That's why decisions are so carefully chosen and taken so long to deliberate on. But with Ethereum, they're willing to embrace very radical, very intense changes. For example, they've got things around like sharding. Let's see. Yeah. So sharding is essentially like taking a blockchain and breaking it up into multiple blockchains, and then all of those blockchains sync with each other. And this sounds good in theory, but it leads to a whole bunch of different issues. It's very, very experimental. For example, if you have Ethereum on one shard, getting it over to another shard could take a long time. And so there might be discrepancy or break of fungibility of one Ethereum doesn't equal one Ethereum. One Ethereum on one shard might be different than another shard due to like they're locked up in different smart contracts, have different time issues. And so it's a really, really radical sort of solution that isn't fully fleshed out. That alone would be a huge issue for the protocol. Another one is switching from proof of work to proof of stake. This is also a huge, huge change. For example, there are unresolved issues around introducing subjectivity into the chain. So, for example, if the internet was partitioned, let's say they cut the internet, they cut the lines between the US, Europe, and Asia, proof of work has a method to self-resolve in this scenario where the longest chain of accumulated proof of work, that is the chain that everyone else would rally behind, and that's Bitcoin's blockchain, even if these chains were partitioned or separated for hours or days. With Ethereum and proof of stake, whenever it makes a shift to proof of stake, this is not possible. Proof of stake has no sort of mechanism to do this automatically, so there has to be a political vote. What that means is that many people have to get together, likely Vitalik, and go choose which chain is the appropriate one. There's also issues too where like Bitcoin proof of work miners can turn off the machines. They don't have to be constantly connected to the internet. Like for example, if there's a power issue and the miners went down, they'd be okay. With proof of stake, liveness requirements are huge. If you go down or if you go offline, it can be perceived as a negative thing and you could have slashing events that occur. Also, due to Ethereum's pre-mine position, there are a large amount of coins that will be used for staking that are just have been gifted to people through the ICO or through, not gifted to the ICO, but gifted to the developers or easily purchased in the ICO, which means that the wealthy continue to get wealthy versus Bitcoin's proof of work. You have to buy these machines and they're expensive and there's no guarantee that it's going to, buying ASICs and running an operation, there's no guarantee it's going to work versus staking, which is much, much easier. And then finally, there's, they've made so many different changes to their monetary policy. For example, a new one that is, again, very experimental. All of these things are, these are sort of constant changes that are occurring. And, with all these constant changes that are occurring, it leaves Ethereum open to exploits and attacks, kind of as evidenced by the near constant stream of DeFi thefts and other things. So, by the way, here's a visualization of sharding. So you've got multiple. I think they want to have 64 shards, and those chains all sync with a beacon chain, and that syncs with the main chain. So it's an extremely complicated system that is, very theoretical. Early in Ethereum's lifetime, it had the DAO hack. So, by the way, with proof of stake, an example of how proof of stake increases centralization as well is, at Kraken, Kraken has 350,000 Ethereum that are staked at Kraken. And what happens is that staking, due to how challenging it is, people often trust centralized exchanges like Kraken and Binance to stake their coins for them. So this leads to a circumstance where all of these coins might just exist on centralized exchanges like Kraken and other exchanges versus individuals, which basically means that the control over the protocol will start to shrink down to a few select big parties. And then the DAO hack, I'm not sure how many, by the way, here's the top 19 DeFi cryptocurrency hacks of 2020. Essentially, DeFi is constantly being exploited. The surface area for attack is massive. And then when we go to the DAO hack isn't remembered by very many people, which is kind of crazy because what happened with the DAO hack is that there was a entity called the DAO that was created on Ethereum and it got hacked. And the Ethereum community decided to reverse the transactions, which completely violates the core principles of having a blockchain. Essentially, Vitalik and his friends said, let's go roll the blockchain back because of this hack. I mean, that's crazy. Jim and I had a really great breakdown of that. And due to this very controversial change, this is why Ethereum Classic exists. Ethereum Classic is the original change where these coins weren't unwound. So this, I think, is a really big, egregious breach that most newbies in the space don't know about, but it's pretty huge. I mean, this sort of violates the core principle of having a blockchain. I mean, it was nuts. And what was crazy too is that the reversal of these transactions passed through a community consensus that had less than 6% of Ethereum voting on the matter, and this was done in under 2 weeks. So this wasn't a decentralized process. This wasn't a proper process. It was very political, with a few individuals essentially deciding on the change. And I think Hasu covers this really well, where he says the DAO incident is at least worth disagreeing about because Ethereum's gospel at the time said code is law. The precept was rightly thrown out with the DAO fork. So code is not law. Things can be reversed, and we're just inserting political nature back into the protocol, which is the whole point of having a blockchain. Is we're supposed to remove all that. It was supposed to be completely neutral. And then so we covered protocol stability. Now we have monetary policy stability. So Satoshi crafted a genius monetary policy breakthrough, a fixed supply of 21 million Bitcoin. He does this for several reasons. It allows Bitcoin to be a precise measuring stick for the economy. It makes it very easy for us to all calibrate the economy because we've got this fixed measurement. It reduces political attack vectors because there's no debating over what the appropriate rate of inflation should be. And it also encourages speculative bubbles, which acts as a viral loop and grows Bitcoin. I cover this, by the way, in Bitcoin's Perfect Monetary Policy in the Held Report, so you can go give that a read if you want to dig in further there. So a couple of things here. Satoshi felt that regarding the political attack vector comment, Satoshi felt that setting a proper rate of inflation was impossible, so he decided to remove human decision-making from the process. And here are the two quotes that he uses. Indeed, there is nobody to act as a central bank or Federal Reserve to adjust the money supply as the population of users grows. That would have required a trusted party to determine the value, because I don't know a way for software to know the real world value of things. He's being a little sarcastic here by saying trusted party. The whole point of Bitcoin is there are no trusted third parties. And then Satoshi also says if there was some clever way, or if we wanted to trust someone to actively manage the money supply to peg it to something, the rules could have been programmed for that. I think, again, he's being sarcastic here if we wanted to trust somebody. Again, he knows that anything that would be, if we start to change the inflation rate, this introduces a political attack vector of us constantly debating what the appropriate rate should be. 1%, 2%, 10%, no one knows. The genius was creating no inflation. It hits a hard cap of 21 million and that's it. And so with Ethereum, what's crazy about their constantly changing monetary policy is that they've replaced suits or central bankers with developers. But it's the same thing. This is no different than the existing fiat money where we have to trust a group of individuals not to change the monetary policy. It's about the continuity and preservation of this monetary policy and the genius breakthrough of the 21 million hard cap. And Hasu also highlights this really well. He goes, I said this a year ago, and I'm saying it now. It'll be very difficult to explain to institutional investors why Ethereum raised inflation in 2020 to the tune of virtually zero backlash from the community. And he's right. You've got developers in a room deciding on the inflation rate, and most of the Ethereum users don't care and or don't pay attention. Very similar to the existing fiat system. You've got a bunch of suits in a room who make these decisions, and we have to trust them. And there's also a fundamental misunderstanding by the Ethereum community around what constitutes sound money or gold 2.0. Vitalik himself actually makes this mistake when him and I had a debate on Twitter where he thinks that sound money is lower inflation. As Vitalik is quoted to have saying, lower inflation is sounder money. But you know what other money has low inflation? The US dollar. But no one would consider that sound money. What makes us sound money is a credible, unchanging monetary policy, and Bitcoin has the perfect iteration of that. Lyd Alden, by the way, a really sharp person in the space, in the macro space, she wrote up an economic analysis of Ethereum that I thought was really phenomenal. And a quote that I took from her in this chart was a really funny one where she goes, the Ethereum annual issuance rate with all those annotation kind of looks like it was drawn by a Bitcoiner making fun of Ethereum. But instead, that's from an Ethereum source. Various Ethereum improvement protocols, or EIPs by developers, have changed its monetary policy over time for various reasons. I mean, we have totally replaced suits with devs, and it is essentially the same process as the existing financial system. How can we trust that the Ethereum's monetary policy won't change again? How can we be sure it won't be a detrimental change? And even if the Ethereum community agrees that it'll never change, and if it honors that, it'll still be 12 years behind the trust that has been built with Bitcoin. And that's what, people don't understand, that with both of the monetary policy and protocol, humans develop trust over time. There's no substitute for time. No matter what tech is built or promises are made, there is nothing that any other protocol can do to replicate the trust humans have with Bitcoin and replicate that trust of 12 years of time that trust has built. So in conclusion, Bitcoin has set out to tackle the largest TAM out there, storing value, which is a $300 trillion plus market. It has largely executed along that path and has gone through numerous trials and tribulations and is increasingly likely to succeed. In order to succeed, Bitcoin just needs to remain the same. Stability in the monetary policy and the protocol. Unchanging is a feature, not a bug. While some whine that it should also do other things, but in doing so, it could damage its core objective. So there's no reason why we should do that. If we use the analogy of a rocket ship launch, Bitcoin has already escaped Earth's atmosphere, has gone past the moon, is on the way to Mars. There's no reason we want to change the trajectory or swap out the rocket engines. Bitcoin is succeeding. There's nothing, we don't need to change anything. It's working. With Ethereum, they're swapping out the rockets and changing the trajectory before they've even left the atmosphere. It's an incredibly risky maneuver, which could yield some really cool results or amazing results, but at the same time could leading to it exploding in flight. I hope you enjoyed this analysis of Bitcoin versus Ethereum. If you really like this and you want to stay up to date with what I've got in the future, make sure to subscribe. Dan Held Substack. Thanks for listening. Cheers.